work that I've done in the past, particularly with the urban explorers, has got me into a lot of trouble. I mean, I got arrested. All of the people that I worked with ended up getting arrested because the police got my fucking notes. And I mean, it was a terrible.
How'd the police get your notes?
It was a terrible situation. Well, I was going out with these urban explorers into all of this subterranean infrastructure underneath London. And after we went into those sewer systems, then we got into electricity tunnels. Then we started getting into bunkers. So
and how illegal is this stuff?
These are like layers under the city. So imagine there's like 5 layers under the city, right? So we go from those sewers to the electricity tunnels to the infrastructural systems to the bunkers, and then we started getting into what are called deep level systems, right? And they're very similar to the bunkers that the U.S. government is building here that they called DUMBs, deep underground military bases, right? We started getting into like serious critical infrastructure. Like at some point,
how easy was it to get into those?
It took us years. It took us years. There was quite a lot of research. Wow. But I mean, at some point we got into what are called the BT deep level tunnels, British telecommunications deep level tunnels, and we were like inside the telecommunications trunk for all of the United Kingdom. And at this point we're like 100 feet underground, 120 feet underground. We were walking through this tunnel about 100 feet underground, and one of the explorers I was with is like, there's a manhole above us. I was like, what do you mean there's a manhole above us? We're in the deepest level right now. And we pop this manhole and a camera swivels, and stares at us. We're like, oh God, and then we realized we were into some critical shit. So
what was it?
It was just telecommunication hubs, right? It's just like the trunk of all of the infrastructure for fiber optics and phone lines.
And they just have an exposed manhole cover and a tunnel that you can get to.
Dude, we wiggled from tunnel to tunnel, like through tiny crevices. We were getting into like the deep underbelly of the city. I mean, it was not easy to get to. But here's the thing: at the same time, we had been cracking all of the abandoned tube stations, metro stations in London, right? So we took a map of the tube from 1932, and we set a map from 2008 on top of it, and what you see are a bunch of stations that are no longer on the map, right? That's your first clue. So there were like 40 some. Then we started doing research, and we figured out that there's got to be at least 14 stations that still have like ticket offices or platforms, or there's something there that you could find. So we started sneaking into the tube to go and find these places. Like we would wait till the train stopped at 2 a.m, and then we would like climb up a bridge and get onto the tracks, and we'd run through the tunnels, and we were finding these stations one after another. Incredible time capsules, where there were artifacts left behind, posters, like we'd find tickets on the ground that were 40 years old, I mean, really cool stuff. A lot of these stations were bombed out during World War II. But finding these is like, again, this kind of like here's the archaeologist in me, right? Like we were having this visceral connection to history. We were finding this stuff that was giving us like a real sense of being inside history in material terms. So we're posting every time we crack one of these stations. We post it on our blogs. We're like, oh, we've cracked Mark Lane, we've cracked Down Street, we've cracked whatever, and we're all excited about it. And like the window's narrowing, and we get towards the end of the 14 stations, and we're starting to think, like the cops are surely watching what we're doing, right? The British Transport Police. And kind of know where we're going to go next because there's only a few stations left. So we stopped posting stuff. And on Christmas of 2012, we cracked the last station underneath the British Museum, which like there's all sorts of cool stories about like there was a ghost in here. It's a haunted station and whatever. But we did it. We never got caught. So for me, this is the end of the research project.
Is there a fear of being like retroactively prosecuted for this stuff?
We'll get there.
Oh.
So I'm done with my research project. I've written my PhD. I published my first book, Explore Everything, about all of our or I hadn't published the book yet, actually. and I fly to Cambodia to work on a totally different research project, right? Like I'm switching gears. I'm going to go do something else. And I fly back from Cambodia via Singapore, and the plane lands at Heathrow. And, you know, the thing goes off, ding, and you stand up and you get your bags, and then nothing's happening. And they say, can everyone please sit down again? And I sit down, I look out the plane, and there's cop cars everywhere. And I'm like, oh, shit. You know, I came from Singapore. Someone brought drugs. I don't know. There's a terrorist on the plane. Like, I have no idea what's going on. And the cops get on the plane, and they're like, 42K, 42K. Dr. Garrett? Yeah? You're coming with us. Okay. So they cuff me. They have me, like, retrieve my bag from the baggage claim, and they take me through passport control in handcuffs. And obviously the UK government's like, yeah, we'll go ahead and keep that passport. Thank you. So they eventually charged me with conspiracy to commit criminal damage. Now, what's weird about England is that trespass isn't a criminal offense. So you can't charge people with trespass unless you're in very specific circumstances. So they tried out this charge of conspiracy to commit criminal damage because it's about intention. It's a thought crime. Like, if I text you and I'm like, hey, dude, you know, the bar is closed right now because of COVID. You want to break in and just, like, pour ourselves a beer? And you're like, yeah, let's do it. Like, we've committed conspiracy to commit criminal damage. Like, we've committed to the crime. So anyway, for years were dragged through the British legal system, and I got trapped in the UK for 3 years.
Whoa!
Well, they kept my passport, dude. I was trapped there. And here's where it gets really weird: is that when the plane landed at Singapore, there was a journalist from GQ who was supposed to meet us because we were going to take him into some of this subterranean infrastructure and show him all these spaces. And he's like, you know, by the time I got out of jail, like 48 hours later, I had all these messages from him, like, you asshole, I showed up at the airport and you weren't there and whatever, you know. And I finally find this guy, Matthew Power, and he's like, are you serious? Like, because we had timed it to land at the same time.
Yeah.
And he's like, you serious? You got arrested at that moment? And he said, what about your house? I said, I have no idea. So we go to my house. And we unlock the door with these keys that the police had given me because they took down my door with a battering ram, right? And then, you know, like put some padlocks on there that they drilled into the door and the door frame. And I open it up and my apartment has just been ravaged, right? Like stuff everywhere. The mattress is flipped over. All the cupboards are torn apart. There's like pieces of the door all over the floor. And underneath all of it, there was a job contract from the University of Oxford to do a postdoc. Because I just finished my PhD. And the journalist from GQ is like, dude, I can go home right now. I've got this story. I don't need to explore anything. I'm done.
And how did it resolve?
Well, by the time we got to court, I mean, the prosecution was just in shambles. I mean, it was a total debacle because there was no evidence that we had broken anything, you know.
Because of their laws, you had just trespassed, which isn't a law.
We just trespassed, yeah. But they spent, you know, £300,000, I don't know, $400,000 of taxpayer money to run this prosecution, so they were going to see it to the end. And essentially, you know, they confiscated my computers, my hard drives, my notebooks, and that was a central component of the evidence that was used to prosecute everyone. So essentially, like, I just made a deal with them. I was like, look, I'll take a hit, you know, if everyone else can just get off, you know, I'll take the hit for it. So I pled guilty to, I think it was 4 counts of criminal damage, which included damage to a screw from a board that I had taken off and put back on to a vent shaft.
Ooh.
I know. Sliding open a window. Oh, that was aiding and abetting. So I'd opened a window for someone to crawl through. I mean, it was just like a list of ridiculous things, but they didn't care because they needed They needed a win. They needed a win, you know. So I gave them that. But now I've got this criminal record in England.
So when you land, you get pulled aside if you go to England?
I used to. I actually filed a complaint with the government, and they would like severely harass me. And then when I moved to Australia, I had the same problem. Like they had put flags on my passport.
And you filed a complaint, and did it go through?
And I filed a complaint, and they fixed it. They took the flags off the passport, yeah.
Oh.
Essentially saying, like, you know, I did my thing, you know. Yeah, like, why do I have to keep paying for this over and over again?
So
But
did
it was
they
really funny
fine
when I
you?
tried when they originally gave me my passport back. So like I go to court and then the judge is like, Dr. Garrett, you're very naughty or whatever. Here, take your passport back.
Do they have wigs on?
Yes. Yeah,
Really?
the wigs are fantastic.
Really?
Yeah.
They still do that?
Yeah, they still do that. They're really
Wow,
good.
that's real.
Yeah. Yeah, the barristers all have their wigs and they
Holy
they
shit.
carry them around like a cat,
And then they have to put it on
And then
when
they
they're
have to put it
doing,
on to do their
that's
formal
fucking bonkers.
But so they give me my passport back, and the next day I was supposed to fly to Sydney to go speak at the Festival of Dangerous Ideas. I was the obvious speaker, right? And I go to the airport, and the guy swipes it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you don't want to use this." I was like, "What does it say? What does the screen say?" And he said, "I can't relay that, but you should probably go." It gives me my passport back, and then
You should probably leave the country?
No, like you should not get on a plane with this. Like you're going to have a problem on the other side. Whatever he saw.
Well, how
on his
else can you
screen.
travel?
Well, exactly. So then I missed my flight, and I had to go back. I had to go to the U.S. Embassy, and I'm like, I've just tried to fly with my passport, and it doesn't work. And the guy at the embassy swipes it, and he says, "Oh wow." And then he gets out a hole puncher and he goes tunk 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 right through my passport, and he says, "You shouldn't use that." And then like 3 hours later, they gave me another passport, and I flew out the next day.
And the passport's good. The new one's
It
good.
was fine. Yeah.
Wow.
But then I started getting stopped again. So they I don't know, tacked the flags on there later.
God
I mean, it was
damn.
a real ordeal. But the thing. I mean, it was traumatic for me. Of course, I was like stuck in a foreign country, and like you get worried about your income. I was worried about being. They did try to deport me at some point, because once you have a criminal offense, they can try and deport. So anyway, I beat that down.
Did they fine you? Like, what was the ultimate judgment?
Yeah, I think it was £2,000, about $3,000. I got fined.
Not too bad.
It's not a big deal.
I'm sure you made some money off the book. If not, you're gonna make some now.
You know what, dude? I made all the money that I made on my first book, Explore Everything, went to my lawyers, who I have to say were phenomenal. Like they did a great job, but it was like every time I get a royalty check, I just sign it over to them, And it did seem like karma. It was like, well, I broke into all this shit, and then I wrote a book, and then the money went to the lawyers, and the lawyers got me off, and it all kind of worked out.
Well, you've done underwater exploration as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What have you done there?
I lived for 2 weeks in the bottom of the sea.
Oh, Jesus. I get weirded out. I get weirded out just you saying that. 2 weeks at the bottom of the ocean?
Yeah.
How deep?
It was exactly 20,000 millimeters under the sea. It was about 60 feet, which works out to be about...
Oh, only 60 feet? That's okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't freak me out too much. I thought you were going to say like miles.
No.
I'd start panicking.
No, it's about 60 feet. But the cool thing was we stayed there for weeks.
Wow.
Now if you're normally scuba diving and you go down 60 feet, you have 60 minutes, and then you got to come back up, or you get too much nitrogen in your blood and you're going to get bent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a problem if you just stay. The problem is then if you stay, you build up all that nitrogen in your blood. Now you can't go back up. So like if you run out of air or you lose sight of your buddy or something, you can't go to the surface because within a couple hours you'll be dead.
Wow.
So you have to stay down there. And we use cave diving techniques that we did a lot of training for to be safe. And we had redundant tanks, redundant manifolds, redundant regulators, and we had valves that we can flip around so we can always make sure we can get air without ever having to, in an emergency, ever having to come up, because coming up is not an option.
So how do you eventually get out?
It's a freaky thing. It takes about a day. And what you do is so we were living in this habitat, and it was kind of like a submarine on the bottom of the ocean, but it didn't have a motor, so it was just like stuck on the floor, like a big cylinder. And it had a hole cut in the side here. And the only thing that was keeping the ocean out was the air pressure inside.
Whoa.
Kind of like taking a cup and flipping it over, putting it in the bathtub and trapping the air.
Oh, God.
And you just scuba dive on down, and then you swim into that thing. And then once you pop up in that hole, it's like you're in a swimming pool inside the habitat. And then you just step out into the habitat.
Whoa.
Have you ever seen the movie The Abyss?
Yes. It's like that.
It's like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
How accurate is that movie?
I think what's the guy? What's the Navy SEAL in there? He gets like
It's crazy from the
gets
bends.
like what they call it, deep dementia or something.
Yeah. Is that fake?
Yeah, that's fake.
Goddamn Hollywood. So this process of getting back to surface level, how long? You said it takes a day. What do you have to do?
So what you do is you close up that hole and you convert the habitat into a pressure chamber. And what you do is you very, very slowly bring the pressure back to sea level. So you decrease the pressure and you slowly, as if you're slowly going up in the water column. And then as you do it gradually, the nitrogen slowly comes out of your blood and you can feel it. It kind of tingles.
Oh, wow.
Over the course of a day, you try to lie still in your bunk and just like read a book or something, but you feel like this tingling. And then after about a day of that, they get you all the way back to sea level slowly so that the nitrogen, you know what it is? It's like if you take a can of soda and you shake it up, if you open the top quickly,
Right.
But if you open the top really slowly and you let it slowly come out, you don't get all the bubbles.
Right.
It's that same effect.
Ah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
What's freakier, being at the bottom of the ocean or being up in space?
Up in space is more surreal. Yeah, because the floating, the earth out the window, the views are better. But being down there was pretty wild, too. I remember once we were doing this experiment where I had my crewmate and I had an ultrasound, and we're doing this telemedicine experiment. So there were these docs in Houston looking at the screen, but there's a delay. And I'm supposed to find her kidney, and I'm like searching around for a kidney. And then I look up and I look out the window and I see a 6-foot hammerhead shark right out the window, and we have a guy in the water, and I dropped a giant F-bomb. I was like, "Fuck!" And all the docs in Houston are freaking out. They're thinking like in a moment they're going to see her liver explode on the screen or something, and they're like, "What's that? How's the patient? How's the patient?" I'm like, "Patient's fine. Got a 6-foot hammerhead out the window."
Yeah, that's got to be really weird, right? You're in that thing in their world. For how long? 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So is that the weirdest animal that you saw? Is the hammerhead?
The scariest thing I saw was one night I was taking a dump. This is a true story. The way you do this, okay, number one, you just pee in the pool, okay? But if you have to go number two, you go into the pool because you don't want a floater in your pool, right? That's
Of course.
like Caddyshack. You don't want that.
Right.
So what you do is you don't take a tank. You just take your mask and your fins. And you go down.
Naked?
You can. We had a mixed gender crew, so I wore some trunks, but and then you just go down, and you have to swim. I don't know. It's like maybe 10, 15 feet. It's not that far. And there's what we call the gazebo, which is just a little dome that has air inside. Now you're out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, like with no tank, and you're 60 feet down. It's night. You can't see a thing. You're alone in the ocean, but you can see this little gazebo. You swim to that. You pop in, and then you got air. Just some valves. You let in some fresh air, and then you hold on, and you take off your trunks, and you just let it rip. But the problem is the fish get accustomed to this.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
So they go there knowing that you're going to poop.
As soon as you drop in the water at night, it's like the dinner bell going off. And there's like
disgusting.
Yeah, because this is feeding time.
Whoa. And so you feel them like pecking at the back door?
The worst are the angelfish because that shape, they can get like right up in there.
Oh,
it's like not cool.
Boy.
So you take your fin off and you're like whacking them.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So that's all bad enough. But as you're doing that, and you're in the pitch black Atlantic Ocean, 60 feet down, no scuba tank.
At night.
With the sound of the ocean like lapping against the dome. And you're looking down and there's endless black, just a black void. And you're thinking about every single scary ocean movie like Jaws, The Meg, whatever, The Abyss, all those scary movies, right? And you think about all this things that could be down there. You can't help but going through your head, so it's kind of freaky. And then you finish, and you put your mask back on, and I took a big breath, and I went down, and I opened my eyes in my mask in the darkness with my flashlight, and I saw, like right in front of me, this huge eyeball, like about the size, I don't know, of a saucer, like this big. staring, unblinking right at me. And I freaked out. I just tore off for the pool, for the moon pool and the habitat. I jumped in there. I surfaced. I'm screaming. And my crew come running thinking I've been bit by a shark or something. And I'm like, giant fish. And
What was it?
It was a Goliath grouper.
Oh, I've seen those things before. They're enormous.
Size of a cow. It's like
hundreds and hundreds of pounds, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Scared the living hell out of me.
Yeah, those things could literally eat a person.
Yeah. It was big enough, that's for sure. And so just the sight of it scared the heck out of me.
So where were you? Were in the Atlantic?
Yeah.
How far away were you from like Florida? Like where were you at?
We were just off the coast of Key Largo.
Okay, because
Yeah.
that's what I was saying. Like they live down there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an enormous fish, man.
Huge.
I've seen videos of people catching them off of boats, and it seems surreal. Look at that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's one.
It's like a giant largemouth bass.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's like. Like if you go bass fishing, they're so similar to bass, like in the way they look.
Yeah, now imagine like
Jesus Christ, look at that thing.
imagine like being eye to eye with that thing in the middle of the dark Atlantic with no scuba tank.
They're delicious too, I bet. Like I don't know if they taste as good as regular grouper.
I wasn't gonna. So you get a different. Yeah, I wasn't gonna find out.
Look at the mouth on that thing. Good Lord.
I'll tell you another quick story about down there. So I went out for a night dive once, and I spent the beautiful thing about saturation diving like this is you can do basically infinite time, bottom time. You're not limited to like 60 minutes. You can stay out there for 6 hours, whatever. So I was not doing this night dive, and I found this beautiful shrimp, and it was just spectacularly gorgeous. It was like translucent. You could see through it. You could see its organs move, like internal organs, like doing their thing. And I stared at it for at least like an hour. Just held my light on it and just sat there and stared at it. And it was really beautiful. And I come back inside the habitat, and I'm kind of hungry. And the best space food we got is shrimp cocktail. And I pulled that thing off the shelf, and I'm like, oh, that looks good. Then I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it, man.
You felt bad because you just
bad.
saw the shrimp? Wow.
I ate it the next day.
The next day.
Yeah.
But for that day, though, you really felt bad.
I felt bad.
Wow. Grouper, you would have felt bad? Like a nice grouper sandwich? You
It
ever have a
scared
nice
me. So
grouper
I think
sandwich
I
in
would
Florida?
I would have been okay with that after. It's because it was.
Yeah, I wonder if they've ever eaten people. Because it seems like they could, they swallow giant fish. It seems like if you're not a large person, they might be able to just suck you right in there. You know?
See, now, if this happens to me again, I'm going to be even more freaked out.
I feel like I've read that grouper have bitten people before.
Yeah.
Like probably trying them out. Like if they get hungry, if you're that big, you probably have to eat so much.
Yeah, this nonstop buffet for those guys. And yeah.
So when you're down there and you're doing all the swimming, you're using a rebreather?
No,
You're using tanks, regular
tanks.
scuba tanks? And what is the capacity of these tanks? Like how long can you stay down just swimming around for?
We have two, and we can isolate them in case one of them springs a leak. But you don't have that much more time than a standard scuba tank. But we have is refill stations all around the floor with high pressure hoses. So we have these quick disconnects on our system that you can plug in and fill it right back up, and then you're good to go for another couple hours.
So when you swim to go take a poo, you have to do that? You have to wear the tank, or do you just hold your breath?
Just hold your breath. You're not going that far.
How far are you going?
Like 15 feet or so.
In total pitch black.
Yeah. There is a light on the gazebo, but that's all.
Well, his work, that DVD series that he did, Magical Egypt, was amazing.
Yeah.
And I had seen your work before that in that Mysteries of the Sphinx thing that was narrated by Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston, NBC, 1993. I think in many ways it was the Mystery of the Sphinx that really broke everything open. It brought everything to the public attention. I've had many people tell me, I'm not trying to brag or anything, I'm just saying factually, that this really opened up a new field, if we could put it that way, a new way of looking at things among the popular public, press, the popular media, but people around the world versus the academic scholarly journals and the back and forth, that type of thing. You have to remember, I'm a faculty member. I'm at Boston University. I'm an academic. And many of the academics have poo-pooed, should we say, over the years, bringing things to the public, but I think it's been important to do.
Now, what we're talking about for the people that are uninformed is the idea that some of the structures in ancient Egypt are far older than conventional wisdom or conventional modern-day archaeology, modern-day Egyptologists. They would like us to believe that all of this spawned from a very specific time period. And people like John Anthony West and yourself and some other folks like Graham Hancock are proposing that it's entirely possible that there were many different eras of construction in Egypt and that there are some structures that are far, far older than we think.
Yeah, exactly. And this, what I was alluding to, is this really opened up with our work on redating the Great Sphinx.
Yes.
And I think you know the story, but maybe just to summarize in the smallest of nutshells, John Anthony West, before I met him, he became a follower, should we say? I shouldn't say follower because that sounds wrong. That sounds like it's a religion dogma. But he became interested in the work of the late Schwaller de Lubitsch, who passed away in 1961. But he had mentioned in one line that the Sphinx had been weathered by rain. I would say precipitation as a geologist, not wind and sand. So this, if it were true, and it is true, would put the Sphinx back to a much earlier period, which would tie in with Schwaller's work and John Anthony West's subsequent work, that there were indications that dynastic Egypt as we know it, going back to about 3000 BC, was really a legacy of what I call now an earlier cycle of civilization. Something that goes back much, much earlier, which at this point I date back to the end of the last Ice Age. Ice Age ended at 9700 BC, just to put it in perspective for people.
So when did you first get on board with this? Did John Anthony West come to you? Or
John Anthony West, okay, so the story goes this way. John Anthony West published Serpent in the Sky, his probably most famous book, first edition, 1979. He was then looking for someone that could really validate or at least assess from a scientific point of view this theory about the Sphinx, which he had just barely sort of touched the surface based on Schwaller that maybe it could be older, but this was really a geological question. He mentions that in 1979 in Serpent in the Sky. John Anthony West went on to become very involved with Egypt, and he started traveling to Egypt. He led tours to Egypt. He wrote The Traveler's Key to Ancient Egypt in 1985, also mentions in appendix, I think it was, just the, quote, older Sphinx theory, but really looking for someone to at least assess it scientifically. He met a fellow in Egypt, actually, at the time, Robert Eddy, who is PhD English literature, I believe, something like that. But he was teaching in Cairo, American University in Cairo, I believe. Then he came to Boston University. This is late 1980s. I was and still do teach at Boston University full-time. Robert Eddy and myself got to know each other. Robert Eddy mentioned me as a geologist to John Anthony West, and that maybe this was someone who seems fairly knowledgeable, fairly open-minded about things.
Now, at the time, did you have any thoughts on Egypt or the dating?
My interest in Egypt goes way back. I was reading about ancient Egypt when I was literally 6, 7, 8 years old. I had a grandmother who had a wonderful library at the time, and I would go through her library. She had books from the British Museum on ancient Egypt going back to the turn of the century. So I was prepared in the sense I was open to such things, but I didn't imagine getting involved in Egypt in any way professionally.
Did you have any thoughts about the dating of the Sphinx or the pyramids or anything back then before you looked into it?
Yeah, there were two things. So there were two things going on in my head back then, which maybe prepped me for this. Number one, I knew the conventional story. I knew that the Sphinx goes back to 2500 BC, according to the standard Egyptologists. In 1989, which is when I believe it was 1989, I first actually met West in person. I had in my mind that the Egyptologists must be correct because they've studied it. They must know what they're doing. I was coming from an academic point of view. I'm just giving saying where I'm coming from.
Right.
I had gone to Yale University to get my PhD in geology and geophysics. I was very well grounded in, quote, the status quo academic point of view. So I thought when I first went to Egypt, I would just prove West wrong. I would just prove that the Egyptologists knew what they were talking about. But, and this is an important but, I was also trained in many ways, both as a graduate student and going back to my grandmother, who I had great respect for, and was also very, should we say, liberal and open-minded, but critical. You always have to follow the evidence wherever it goes, and that's always been my rule of thumb, that not everything is always the way people say it is, even if they're, quote, authorities. And something I already knew when I went to Egypt for the first time was that some of the very old Egyptologists in the late 19th, early 20th century had actually suggested that just the way it looks, the feel of the Sphinx, not based on hard evidence really, that maybe it was older than the pyramids, that maybe it goes back earlier. So I felt that it wasn't all said and done and, pat and sound, that the Egyptologists necessarily knew what they were talking about in modern times, because some of the earlier Egyptologists, who they held in very high respect supposedly, had said different things. Secondly, and I hate to bring this up, but I will because it's part of the background, my grandmother, who I mentioned a second ago, was a theosophist. And if you know anything about theosophy, it also suggests that, maybe there's things that go back earlier.
What is a theosophist?
A theosophist, it's how do I explain it? Have you heard of Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky?
No.
No, okay. Whoop, I'm losing my headphones. Theosophy was founded in the late 19th century. It questioned a lot of the materialistic values, a lot of the dogma of science of the time, of religion of the time. It looked to the East in particular, to other philosophies, other worldviews. So basically, it was a way. This is what it did for me, at least. And I'm not a theosophist. I don't want to say I'm a theosophist. But reading theosophical works on top of everything else allowed me, I think, to expand my horizons and to see that maybe the dogma of the day is just that, the dogma of the day, that there are other possibilities. And not that we accept something just because someone said it, or because it's old, or because it's this religion or that religion, or that's supposed to be ancient culture. But no, you keep everything open, you look at the evidence, and that's really where I was coming from. But my point is that even in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when I first got involved with this, if I looked at it critically, the evidence was not that definitive for the age of the Sphinx. So I was going in with open-minded possibilities, but honestly, when I first went to Egypt with John Anthony West in 1990, I thought, before I got off the plane, that this would be simple, open and shut case. I would prove him wrong in the sense of his assertions that maybe the Sphinx was older. I had no doubt at the time that my colleagues in Egyptology must know what they're talking about, and all of that changed literally within 30, without exaggerating, 30 to 120 seconds of first seeing the Sphinx. Yeah, it really did.
What was your first impression?
Because my first impression of the Sphinx was, now that I saw it on the ground, in person, there was something wrong with the Egyptological dating. Because when you look at the Sphinx, as a geologist with a geological eye, this was not weathered by wind and sand. This was not desert erosion and weathering that I saw on the Sphinx, the body of the Sphinx, which is very difficult to tell because it's been heavily repaired and reworked, but particularly on the walls of what are known as the Sphinx enclosure. The Sphinx enclosure is important because it preserves a lot of the details. And if the audience has not been to Egypt, they should realize that when they carved the Sphinx, it's all solid bedrock. Only the head initially was above the ground surface. They carved down into the rock to free up the body, what I call the core body of the Sphinx. And it's that core body and the walls of the enclosure, more or less the quarry around it, if you want to use that term, that show these ancient weathering precipitation, erosional features that are incompatible with the last 5,000 years of climatic history on the eastern edge of the Sahara. So immediately I knew there was something wrong geologically, had to figure that out. Either this was a weird geological anomaly or something else was going on, and the Sphinx might go back to an earlier period. Also, I want to point out that when you look at the Sphinx, and other geologists have looked at this as well, they did not just chip away at the rock to carve the body. More or less, you could have chipped away at the rock with pickaxes and that type of thing, shoveled out chips of rock in baskets. That would have been the easy way. What they did is they carved out huge blocks of stone. And when I say huge, we're talking multi-ton, tens of tons, some of them maybe over 50 tons or more of limestone. They moved those due east of the Sphinx and built what is now known as the Sphinx Temple, which is still there in ruinous condition, and the Valley Temple. So you had these two huge temples. And what is interesting, a lot of people don't realize this or they don't think about it. I think those constructions, which are contemporary with the oldest portion of the Sphinx, in some ways are more impressive if you think about the technology and what went into constructing them than the age of the Sphinx itself. So it's not just the Sphinx, it's also these limestone temples that are associated with it and were built contemporaneously.
So Jamie pulled up two photos here. The first one that he pulled up was a computer image that showed the Sphinx and showed...
Okay, I'm looking at it now, yes. And in this image, what you can see, that's a computer image that's actually from Mystery of the Sphinx, and then there's an inset that's an aerial photograph, the real thing, and that shows how when they were carving the body, they cut out huge blocks and then put them in position to make what's known as the Sphinx Temple, due east of the Sphinx.
And the second image is the Sphinx Temple?
Okay, and you look at this, it says the Sphinx faces due east, the rising sun, and right in front of it is the Sphinx Temple. So this is a humongous temple made out of these huge blocks of stone, which were carved out when they carved the body of the Sphinx. And here you see in this image another picture of the Sphinx Temple.
And so these erosion
and you
features
can see
that you're
how
looking
big
at here,
they are. You can see how big they
enormous.
are. They're enormous. Okay, these erosion features on the blocks, don't worry about them for the moment.
Okay.
Let's go back to the Sphinx enclosure itself. It's a Sphinx enclosure where you see the rolling, undulating profile, the erosional features. Here you see it in that picture, the vertical fissures, and I know you're familiar with this personally because I've heard you talk about it with John Anthony West, that can only be caused by precipitation. The rocks are like a layer cake, so it takes out the softer layers, it recedes the softer layers, some of the harder layers stick out further, but the water also finds its way down crevices and cracks, natural features that are slightly softer, and it forms these vertical fissures. I want to make the point because a lot of people get confused. They say, couldn't it be rising Nile floods? No. Geologically, that would give a very different signature on the rock. It's not floods coming up from the bottom. It's actually precipitation and rainfall runoff coming from above.
And rainfall for thousands of years?
Well, there's two aspects here. It could be thousands of years. It could be much stronger rainfall, huge flash floods, that type of thing. And part of the story that I hope we'll get to is that initially, I'm jumping around here a little bit.
No worries.
But initially, I was thinking 5,000 to 7,000 BC. That was very conservative based on the geological data, based on the seismic, which we have to get to also. But now I believe we're talking prior to 9,700 BC for the original construction of the Sphinx, and we can talk about why the dating. And at 9,700 BC, we have the end of the Younger Dryas, the end of the glacial epoch, the end of the last ice age. I have now put together the story based on evidence. And whenever if I say I believe something or I think something, it's always based on evidence that I've been piecing together, that what we had ending the Younger Dryas, ending the last ice age, was a huge eruption from the sun, a huge solar outburst, huge climatic changes, which put, among other things, a lot of precipitation, a lot of moisture into the air, which came down as precipitation with huge floods, huge essentially thunderstorms, et cetera. And I think a lot of the initial erosion that we still see on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure go back to that period. So you had the situation where you would get this incredible weathering and erosion, and then it continued for thousands of years after that and was reinforced until you had the Sahara coming in relatively recent times, in geologically Holocene times.
The Sahara Desert,
the Sahara Desert, yes.
So before that, it was some sort of a rainforest.
It's savanna to rainforest. It actually varied over time, and before that, it was very fertile savanna, lots of plants there. People have seen it even in popular movies and whatnot, how the Sahara at one point had water and all kinds of animals. That's before the end of the last ice age, before these incredible changes that we have at 9700 BC. So that's where the Sphinx, I think the original Sphinx, goes back to that time period, and that's what the Egyptians called Zep-Tepi. This was a first time for them, or what I call an earlier cycle of civilization. The last cycle, the one that we're still part of, in my terminology, is the last 5,000 years. So civilization arising, re-emerging, I should say, about 3,000 to 4,000 BC, coming into really what we have now, high technology, et cetera. But before that, there had been an earlier cycle of civilization that was essentially snuffed out or brought to its knees, if you would, by the end of the last ice age. And just to map this out, a period from about 9700 BC, this is what I'm reconstructing now, to about 4000 to 3000 BC, where we have civilization reemerging. Between that period, so thousands of years, 9700 BC to, say, 3700 BC for round numbers, 6,000 years, we have essentially a dark period, and what I've been now calling SIDA, solar-induced dark age. Sort of ironic, the sun would induce a dark age because it brought civilization back to an earlier stage, if you would.
I'm not sure I follow that. How did the sun do this?
Solar outburst, essentially coronal mass ejection,
right.
Huge eruption, bigger than anything we've ever seen on Earth.
And so that's what caused these massive thunder showers, and
exactly.
Nothing in modern history.
Nothing in modern history is even close to this, but we do have isotope data, et cetera, that indicates this has happened in the past at the end of the last ice age, and I'm sure it's happened many times over. And you have a lot of markers that indicate this. You have vitrification of rock. In fact, a lot of the markers, and I don't want to be debating the issue necessarily, but a lot of the markers that people have used for a comet at the Younger Dryas or during the Younger Dryas, really most of them are at the beginning of the Younger Dryas. That's what they're claiming, but a lot of the dating is very, very iffy. I found it interesting, for instance, someone will use something as a marker for the Younger Dryas, and it will give a date of 12,000 plus or minus 4,000 years. So, this is just the way geology is. But
now, I'm not believe it or not, I'm not into UFOs. I don't follow stories or,
Even after your experiences?
No, I'm fascinated with the technology, and it irks me like every night I go to sleep that, that it was my own doing, essentially, that prevented me from continuing on in the project. I mean, it's that to be on that cutting edge of technology is so alluring to me.
Right.
But, by the same token, I don't really care that there's aliens or where they come from. I mean, the prize is the technology, and that's what I'm fascinated by. But so I don't listen to UFO stories and that sort of thing. But George Knapp is, he's the guy that has the contacts and tries to thread everything together. And what he recently told me is he found, I don't know, it was either documentation or people that he spoke to. It's that the existence of this project, the project that I was on, it's something that they seem to take out every 8 or 10 years.
So that's a very specific memo, and this is actually, this is the first time I'll be very clear with people about it. It's a big topic of conversation right now. It's called the Wilson Memo. You can look it up. Admiral Wilson met with a scientist who's actually was featured in one of my films. Everybody has been debating whether or not this document of a conversation with a sitting admiral at the time is a real document. It's an actual conversation that happened, and this document is real. Everybody wants to know. The world is going crazy right now in the UFO world. I'll tell you straight up right now, I'm in the position to know, and it is a real document, that it is real. So the conversation you read in that conversation was had. I can't attest to every...
You're not being very clear.
Sure.
Please.
No problem. So there was a document that is circulating right now that is really big. It's going around everywhere. People are asking and wondering.
What is this document?
It's called the Wilson Memo, is how you can find it online, or the Wilson Leak.
There it is. Jimmy's got it. The Wilson Memorandum. Use of human volunteers.
No.
I just want to make sure that was it. Yeah.
No, that's not it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Admiral Wilson meets with this scientist, and they have this discussion, oddly enough, at special projects at EG&G. And if I remember, the document is from 2001. I'm telling everybody right now, it's real. And we'll see. My history is pretty good with saying if something's real or not, right? So here we go. The document comes out. They meet at EG&G Special Projects. In 1989, they stumble into a problem. This happens. They put the technology away, and then they bring it back out and see if material science has caught up and if they can make any progress. So this document kind of talks about this process. The big thing I get from it, and a lot of it's vindicating to Bob, and one of the things it's vindicating, besides the EG&G thing, is that private industry, so this guy's an admiral, and he says, I found out about your SAP, your Special Access Program. I need to know about it. And he's going to a private part of industry, and he is denied access. And he says, I should be running this program. And they were able to deny him access. So I think the takeaway here is, check it out. I'm telling you that is an actual correct, that is a leak. Now, everything said in that document, I don't know.
What are you talking about? What is said in that document specifically?
It's between a scientist and an admiral that are sitting, and they're having a meeting, and they're talking about the search for the UFO subject, the search to get special access program access to all of these different things like reverse engineering programs. So in this document, they talk about it. I believe that this document, the person that went was employed by Robert Bigelow, one of the guys that has a couple orbiting satellites and all that stuff.
He's the guy who owns Skinwalker Ranch.
No, he's not. He was the guy that owned
Skinwalker.
To own it.
Okay.
Yeah, he used to own it. There's a new owner, and I interviewed him for my other film, but there's a new owner, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that soon. But there's stuff that you'll be hearing about Skinwalker Ranch soon because there's a new owner. Anyway, the whole point of this insertion here is just that document kind of validates a lot of this idea Bob just said, that they make a little progress, then they can't go anywhere. They tuck it away, and then they bring it back out 10 years later and start working on it. What is the limiting factor? I think Bob should speak on this, but it's the material science.
Yeah, it's really where physics is. So I can see them doing that. I mean, I didn't have any information on that, but I think what George uncovered is probably accurate. That we try and do what we can, and once we reach a roadblock going, we really can't figure it out. It's just friggin' wait, put the thing away, wait for science to catch up, and a decade later, let's take the project out again and see. All right, now where can we go?
But there's got to be someone who remains informed, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you've got your scientists like you and Barry. You got your people that you compartmentalize. You got these people working on.
Yeah, there has to be some people
right.
that know everything.
You've got security, and then someone's going to be on the outside saying, "Hey, we need people to guard this building. Don't let anybody in for 10 years."
I think a lot of that is private industry, and I think that's how they keep it. Yeah, I think that's how they because the government is just so leaky. I think that's kind of what they're doing.
That's what the document kind of proves. You just articulated that it is in control of private industry.
What private industry? Some aerospace company, something?
I don't know.
Yeah, the admiral wouldn't name it in the car in the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
So they still have these things, supposedly.
I would guess. I mean, I don't have any information on that.
Have you ever asked anyone that has any inkling of any idea of where they got them or how they got them?
No, but something must have been said to me from Barry but it was just too long ago, and I can't quite remember what was said, but it just left a seed in my mind. I think at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig. So it's old. At least one of them is old. I don't know if it was the one I worked on, but I remember something to do with an archaeological dig.
Whoa.
So that means it's not just old, it's ancient.
That'd be a great Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Right?
As all of it would. Yeah.
Yeah, that tripped me out when he said that for the first time.
Yeah. That's a freak out right there. Just a couple of dudes with some brushes looking for a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone. They hit metal.
And when did they find it? You know, that they have 9 of them.
Yeah.
Well, and how could we have not heard about that? What about the guys with the brushes? How could you uncover something like that? And
well, Joe's newspaper at home does. I mean, they said it on that first day.
Oh, you mean the Roswell Daily Record?
Yeah, the one you told me.
Yeah, I have a cover. What is this here, Jamie?
This is the document, but I had to do some digging to find it.
Yes, it's just kind of, so this is where they meet at EG&G, and this is Admiral Wilson, and there's a lot more coming out. Now, I want to be clear, George didn't put this out. He didn't leak this out to anybody. This is, I can tell you how
Who recorded this conversation?
So this was an employee of, at the time, Robert Bigelow.
And this is in 2002?
Right. Do you remember when he had that government contract called OSAP, the world all knows about now, and he had NIDS that studied the ranch? So that $22 million, everybody is saying it was for ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The $22 million was for OSAP that was pushed through Congress, 3 congressmen, right, an astronaut. It was pushed through. And that's what that $22 million, by the way, they spend more money on Viagra every year than they do studying UFOs if it was just this program, which I think is funny.
They probably make a lot more money from Viagra
they probably
than
do
from UFOs, too.
Well, you never know how it seeds into population. But anyway, this program, this is what was the mother program. So it got the $22 million. And really, it was to study Skinwalker Ranch. Oddly enough, that $22 million all was inspired by the phenomenon they were seeing at Skinwalker Ranch, because the scientists, they're seeing vehicles come through like a space in the sky.
Yeah, we went there. I went there with Duncan.
Yeah,
we interviewed a bunch of people that seemed full of shit, but a couple that didn't. It was very, very interesting.
Totally. And if you look, I spent a lot of time in the area. I'm not talking about those stories. I'm saying there were scientists hired by the government, right, through Bigelow to study the ranch because they thought it was important. And, whatever. The point is that $22 million was to study that. Then we have ATIP, which is like an auxiliary kind of program of military sightings, like Commander Fravers and that sort of thing. This document is just one of those things that has now come forward that through the Bigelow studies, it was government funded, and then it was personally funded and then government funded. It's just one of those things that kind of shakes you, because you got this military guy who can't get access because of the private industry that's holding these non-terrestrial materials, that they can't study it. So that's the claim right now. Give it some time, let people dig more into this. It's fascinating, man.
And then there's the moon.
And then the moon's weird too.
The moon's really weird.
The moon's super weird.
The size of the moon directly corresponding, like when it's in orbit with the sun, completely blocks out the sun perfectly.
It's 1/400th the size of the sun, and it's 400 times closer to the Earth than the sun. You never see the dark side, which is very weird. It's actually, I believe it's closer to the Earth than what you would normally expect for a moon.
And it's huge.
It's huge. You have cultures actually talking about a pre-moon period, and it's stabilizing the climate. You have the Zulu cultures talking about this. And then here's the weirdest stuff about the moon. Apollo 11, I believe, when the booster took off on the moon, they were like, "Oh, we think it might be hollow," and it's it seems like actually the outer layer of the moon is less dense, is more dense than lower layers, which pattern matches only to an excavation site. That's obviously in Earth. The lower you go, it's more dense, right? And so Apollo 12, they intentionally crashed the booster of the lunar vehicle onto the moon. They put seismometers there, and they said that it rang like a bell. This is all fact. You could look all this stuff. It's super weird.
It is really weird. I know you did an episode about that with Randall Carlson.
Love Randall Carlson.
Yeah, he's got some wild fucking theories too. But the idea that the moon was somehow another place there to stabilize our atmosphere is so crazy.
It is crazy. And then this is you obviously have to sort of think in probabilities all the way down. Lowest probability, craziest thing is Ingo Swann, who is another remote viewer in the Stargate program. He wrote a book called Penetration, where he's basically like abducted by this guy in a suit, like this kind of Men in Black style guy named Axelrod. And he is told to remote view the moon. And he remote views an alien base on the moon. And he says that and he gets it. The whole thing goes crazy. I mean, the book is insane. It's like he then ends up in a supermarket and he says that he senses that this woman at the produce aisle is like an alien or something. But a lot of people from that Stargate program remote viewed, structures on the dark side of the moon and that sort of thing. So,
well, but AJ from the Y Files was on, and he was the one that was telling us that there's photos, right, of the dark side of the moon, that someone had seen photos and was assuming that these would be released shortly, that there were structures. Wow, this is going to be the biggest news ever, and then it was never released.
Are you talking about maybe Carl Wolf?
Is that what it was?
Who was taken to, this is all his claims, and he died in a freakish bike accident a little after saying this. But he said that there was like in like Langley, Virginia, where a lot of spooky stuff goes on. He was taken to some it was like inside a mountain complex, which we definitely, Carl Wolf, yeah.
That guy bikes?
Apparently not enough.
That guy could die any time
on
a scooter. So photographs of the 1966 lunar orbiter mission that revealed large base of the moon. Can we hear what he's saying?
It's a 4-minute video.
Just hear a little bit of it.
Scan one section of the moon, then another and another, and then they would get a larger image. So this mosaic then would be put in that contact printer, and that was then a print that was issued to whomever, the press, the scientist, whatever, wherever that was intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers, and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So I didn't say any more to him because I was concerned again that somebody was going to come in at any moment, would catch us having this conversation, and we would be in real trouble. I realized that he was telling me this information because he didn't have anybody else to talk to. Now, probably in that laboratory, he was probably one of the few enlisted people, and he was a worker bee. And he had a high-level security clearance, obviously, but he couldn't share that information with anybody else. And in those days, we didn't. When you had your security clearance, you took it seriously. It isn't like today where people don't take these things seriously. We had a different set of morals and ethics and values. That's the way we were raised, and we stayed bound by those agreements. So it was rare that someone would do something like this, but this fellow and I were the same rank. I think he was very distressed. He had the same pallor and demeanor as the scientists outside the room. They were just as concerned as he was, and he needed to discuss it with somebody. So that was the end of it right there. I didn't take it any further than that. I just filed it away. But the interesting thing, every day that I went home, I would think to myself, I can't wait to hear about this on the news, And, so I'd turn on the TV and I'd look at the news to see if they're going to announce, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon, being really naive, And, of course, here it is 30-some years later, and we still haven't heard about it.
Whoa.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, but then there's the question of disinformation, right? Like, you could conceivably give people a bunch of nonsense and tell them about it, knowing that some of it is going to leak and it won't be verified, and it's going to make this whole story seem even more ridiculous and make people less likely or reluctant to study it.
Totally. And in his case, he says that he was in this, mountain base or whatever, where all of the world's nations were working together as part of some collegial UN style space program or whatever. So that to me might be a little, beyond the pale. And I'm glad you made that point, because that is ufology 101. And I've heard you be incredibly exhausted and frustrated at UFO disclosure. And I think that is the reasonable response. It is limited hangouts on limited hangouts. It's just, we're going to give you a little bit, but we're also going to sprinkle in some falsities and some bullshit. We're going to stigmatize it. And it kind of works because it creates this initiation path for recruiting if there are any of these programs. It widens the surface area. It both conditions the populace, but also stigmatizes the thing and makes it seem like kind of a joke. And so I think if you are not viewing modern disclosure through that kind of hermeneutic lens of interpretation, and you're just taking it, accepting it, imbibing it wholeheartedly, prima facie, I think you are in trouble.
Yeah.